and their commitment as public servants, as union members, to get this thing done. And you know, we can give the fancy speeches all day long, but we're able to stand here and do this because they did this work on the ground. In many cases, working as many as 14 hours a day, out of sheer commitment and a sense of duty and responsibility to deliver for the people of Los Angeles. So it's extraordinary work that happened here. And yes, Governor, Madam Mayor, the Senator, we all talked on a daily basis practically, and the estimates were that this was going to take a long time. There were some who said that a 3 to 4 week estimation was ambitious. But these folks, these people who work every day on this, who are experts, who understand the specifics, who understand the detail, they didn't listen to all that. They just did the work and they saw it through. And on behalf of President Biden and myself and our administration, we applaud this work. And this is the kind of work, frankly, that is happening around the country, where hardworking men and women, carpenters, laborers, city workers, county workers, government workers are rebuilding America. We have invested billions of dollars in rebuilding America's roads and bridges, lead pipes removal, what we are doing to ensure that all families have access and can afford high-speed internet. This is all about rebuilding America's infrastructure. And it has been a commitment of ours from day one. Many talked about doing it. You'll remember Infrastructure Week. By the way, it never happened.
Every week.
But what we have been able to accomplish is, for California alone, a $33 billion commitment to help build back up the infrastructure in our home state. We're looking at already over 1,100 projects underway in California because of the work and the commitment that Joe Biden and I and our administration have had to ensure that federal dollars come to states like California to do the work that must be done. And so I want to again applaud everybody, and then to all the Angelenos, I would just say this. Tomorrow the commute is back on, and happy Thanksgiving. There's so much to be thankful for. You know, we're living in a world right now where it's heavy, and it's hard. And when we can have these moments to applaud the commitment of people to folks that they never meet, these workers, their commitment to the families and the individuals who need to pass this freeway every day, it's a moment to give thanks for the folks who care and to remember that we're all in this together. So thank you, and happy Thanksgiving, everybody.
Here, here. Howdy, RGV. Great to be back here again, and I want to thank Brandon Judd for everything he does. He is the leader of the Border Patrol Union. He is one of the people who are on the front line of trying to secure our border in the United States of America, and he's doing so with an extraordinarily hostile president working against him. It's amazing they're able to do what they were able to do, but when you think about the way that President Biden is fighting back against his own Border Patrol, it takes somebody like Brandon Judd, his strength of character, his stiff spine, his experience in fighting these battles, to know that we have men and women in the Border Patrol on the front line trying to do their job, even though they have their hands tied behind their backs by President Biden. But give it up for our great members of the Border Patrol and everything they do to try to keep America safe. I come here every Thanksgiving to give thanks to the men and women in uniform. We have men and women in this area just to your side. Men and women who are members of the National Guard, members of the Border Patrol, and members of the Texas Department of Public Safety. They work every single day to help protect our state. You know, come here and thank them, because, listen, we know everyone likes to be with their family during the time of Thanksgiving. That includes members of the DPS and the National Guard and the Border Patrol, but they cannot be with their family members at home. They cannot do what most Americans and Texans would do during the time of Thanksgiving, because they are called upon to protect and serve the United States and the state of Texas by working collectively to secure our border. I want to also thank the men and women of the National Guard and Texas DPS for everything they do to protect our state. But listen, one very important point about this, and that is those men and women of the Border Patrol, especially the men and women of the Texas National Guard and Texas Department of Public Safety, they should not be here at this time. They should be at home. The only reason why they are here is because we have a president of the United States of America who is not securing our border. If Joe Biden was just enforcing the laws that currently exist, our border would be secure. Because Joe Biden is not doing that, that's exactly why we have to have the National Guard and the Texas Department of Public Safety. But remember this, a president can secure the border. If you go back 4 years ago, we had the lowest illegal border crossings in something like 30 or 40 years. The most secure border in the adult lifetime of everybody at this event here today is because President Trump put into place 5 strategies. President Trump implemented the Remain in Mexico strategy, the Title 42 strategy. He eliminated catch and release. He built a border wall. And maybe most importantly, he said, if you want to come to America, come here legally, not illegally. And he said, you are not welcome if you come here illegally. And then in came Joe Biden. And Joe Biden eliminated all of those policies that were put into place by President Trump. And because he eliminated those policies, what has happened to our country has been catastrophic. All-time records have been set the past few years of the number of people coming across the border illegally. 2 years ago, we had more than 2.3 million people apprehended coming across the border illegally. This past year, more than 2.4 million have come across the border illegally. Altogether.
And global humanitarian Rosalind Carter, but for us, it's personal. She belonged here to us in Georgia. I'm George Estevez.
Good evening, everyone. I'm Linda Stouffer. Candace McCowan will join us shortly. What a life of impact. The Carter Center announced the former First Lady passed away in her home in Plains with her family, right by her side. We want to show you a live picture of the Carter Presidential Library right in front of the Carter Center in Northeast Atlanta. Mrs. Carter's legacy is deep. She spent years bringing awareness to mental health issues, a champion for caregivers, and standing beside the love of her life, former President Jimmy Carter. After leaving Washington, they co-founded the Carter Center to continue their work around the world.
Her husband released this statement on the passing of his wife, saying, "Rosalind was my equal partner in everything I ever accomplished. She gave me wise guidance and encouragement when I needed it. As long as Rosalind was in the world, I always knew somebody loved and supported me."
And we have live Team 2 coverage for you of the passing of the former First Lady, from her life here in Georgia to her impact around the world. We begin in her hometown of Plains, Georgia, where Channel 2's Barron Peterson joins us live. Barron.
Well, here along Main Street, all is very, very quiet. Any shops are open on a Sunday, closed hours ago. But we did meet some folks who were out and about tonight. They had all heard, of course, and they shared their stories about Rosalind Carter. In downtown Plains, Georgia, at the corner of Main Street and Rosalind Carter Trail, all is calm and bright. Folks fondly remember.
They come through the neighborhood on a bicycle. We ride with them when we young. You know, before we can go with them. You know, they were good people.
Gerard Burton was a child when he first met Rosalind and Jimmy Carter. Inside the local Dollar General, the only business still open on a Sunday night, customers recalled the lady they all loved and respected.
Oh, yeah. They come around, they shake hands with everybody.
Your heart goes out to them?
Yes, it do. Yes, it do.
Eleanor Rosalind Smith was born and raised in Plains. She was valedictorian of Plains High School. And in 1946, not yet 20 years old, she married one James Earl Carter Jr. She was the mother of 4 children, wife of a president, and the favorite daughter of this tiny town.
I'm sorry for their loss, that they lost a good person. And she will respect around here in the Plains.
Those residents told me one of the things they always loved about Rosalind Carter was that anytime they would see her here in town, they could always go up to her and say hello. Reporting live in Plains, Barron Peterson, WSB Tonight.
She was so relatable, and she talked a lot about those everyday kindnesses that make the world a better place. Barron, thank you.
Mrs. Carter used her platform as First Lady to be an advocate for people battling with mental health and for caregivers, too. This is one of the stories we have right now on WSBTV.com, looking back at her life. She says she developed her interest in mental health during her husband's campaigns for Georgia's governor. We continue our live Team 2 coverage tonight from the Carter Library, where many will gather to pay their respects in the coming days. Channel 2's Candace McCowan live there for us now. And Candace, people showed up tonight.
Well, George, as that news spread throughout the afternoon, you had several people who were coming here to pay their respects, many of them having these personal interactions with the former First Lady, and others just wanting to remember her legacy.
I think it's a very sad day in Georgia.
When the news of Rosalind Carter's death got to those who lived near the Carter Presidential Library and the Carter Center, many felt sadness coupled with warm memories.
My husband rolls the window down and was like, "Hi, Jimmy. Hi, Rosalind." And they waved to us, and we were just really friendly.
Years ago, she would be followed by the Secret Service, but took time to talk to us.
The Rosalind Carter Institute for Caregivers said Mrs. Carter reminded people to do what you can to show you care about other people, and you will make our world a better place. And that was her hope. Over the years, she focused on mental health.
I would get over stigma if I could wave a magic wand. And that would help more than anything that I know of.
And doctors point to her mission as key in addressing mental illness.
How far ahead of time was Rosalind to mental health? And it's very important to have advocacy such that people don't feel uncomfortable or embarrassed, and then therefore not seek the help that they need.
She also lifted up the voices of family caregivers. For the many touched by her life, they hope we can all hold on to Mrs. Carter's legacy.
The dignity, the warmth, and the compassion that they had for so many people that you don't see quite often in others in the political arena. Take that and run with it.
Channel 2's Candace McCowan joining us back live now from the Carter Presidential Library, also the Carter Center. So Candace, Mrs. Carter, she made a request to keep fighting for others, and that request happened even after her death.
And George, she made it clear that she doesn't want flowers at this time, but she would instead prefer that people make donations to the Carter Center Mental Health Program as well as the Rosalind Carter Institute for Caregivers in her memory. George?
And a memory that will be lasting for so many people in our state. Candace, thank you.
America's first family reacting to the passing of Mrs. Carter. Earlier, Jill Biden asked a crowd in Virginia to keep the Carter family in their prayers. And tonight, President Biden spoke to reporters.
You know, they're really an incredible family because they brought so much grace to the office. I was told that all the family, all the children and grandchildren are with Jimmy.
She was well known for her efforts on mental health and caregiving and women's rights. So I hope that during the holidays, you'll consider saying include the Carter family in your prayers.
And tonight we have more reaction from other former presidents and first ladies. Former President Donald Trump wrote, "Melania and I join all Americans in mourning the loss of Rosalind Carter. She was a devoted first lady, a great humanitarian, a champion for mental health, and a beloved wife to her husband for 77 years, President Carter." Former First Lady Michelle Obama is praising Rosalind Carter for her community service. She said, "Barack and I join the world in celebrating the remarkable legacy of a First Lady, philanthropist, and advocate who dedicated her life to lifting up others. Her life's a reminder that no matter who we are, our legacies are best measured not in awards or accolades, but in the lives we touch."
Former President Bill Clinton said Rosalind Carter was a compassionate and committed champion of human dignity everywhere. Hillary and I are deeply grateful for her extraordinary service to our nation and world, and for more than 40 years of friendship.
And tonight you're going to hear from one of Rosalind Carter's best friends who's sharing memories from Douglasville. Channel 2's Courtney Francisco continues our live Team 2 coverage now. She was the only one to talk to her tonight. So Courtney, I mean, that had to be an amazing conversation.
Yes, her name is Dot Paget, and she met Mrs. Carter when Jimmy Carter was running for governor.
Well, that's me, and that's Rosalind.
As many of us do when we just hear of a friend's death, we turn to pictures.
Now, this is Rosalind. This was taken in the White House.
And that's what Dot Paget was doing when we met her on the front porch of the Douglasville home where she spent precious time with Rosalind Carter.
I celebrated my 90th birthday right here at this house, and Jimmy and Rosalind came to celebrate with me. They surprised me.
Sunday, she got the call. Her best friend died in hospice.
When I first met her, I was working with Jimmy when he ran for governor in 1970. I looked at her schedule, and I thought, well, you know, I don't think they're using her. So we arranged what we called Meet Rosalind Carter luncheons. She was shy. She admitted that she was shy, but she would make this little talk.
While we watched her transform into the First Lady, Paget said their conversations centered around kids and grandkids.
You know, she had a talent for saying and doing the right thing.
Reflecting on what she'd tell her best friend tonight.
Rosalind, everyone has appreciated what you have done.
A message of gratitude, ending with a little best friend humor.
And how hard she worked and how much I wish she got better recognition for it.
Channel 2's Courtney Francisco is back live with us now from the state capitol. It was really great to hear her friend talk about her like that. You can really feel that friendship.
Yes, and Paget said so little time has passed since learning of her death. Her words don't express how deeply sad she feels right now.
I can only imagine a friendship for so many decades. Courtney, thanks for bringing us that conversation. And we have more details now on the life of Rosalind Carter. She was the closest advisor to Mr. Carter during his presidency and even attended cabinet and national security meetings. Aides referred to her privately as co-president. At 96, she was the second longest living First Lady, trailing Bess Truman, who lived to 97.
In the last hour, we learned when ceremonies celebrating her life will take place. A week from tomorrow, there will be a wreath laying at Georgia's Southwestern State University, then at the Jimmy Carter Presidential Library back in Atlanta, where she will lie in repose. That Tuesday, a tribute service planned at Glenn Memorial Church at Emory University. And then Wednesday, the 29th of November, the family will hold her funeral at Maranatha Baptist Church in Plains before a private interment at their family home.
And a big storm system that's currently over center parts of the country, that is going to be taking aim at us later into the week. We'll time out how this will impact any of your holiday travel plans coming up.
Andrew Young had a special relationship with the entire Carter family.
She was the first president's wife that I know of that regularly sat in on cabinet meetings.
He reflects on the First Lady's legacy ahead in a live report.
And as we remember the former First Lady tonight, we're looking back at her life, including her 77-year marriage to her husband, former President Jimmy Carter.
The people that own homes along the border, they told me it was the greatest period of time they've ever had, the 4 years. And now they say it's the worst that anybody's ever seen. They're afraid to walk out. They can't walk out. They want to leave. They want to sell their homes, but they can't get people to buy them. But we're going to make those homes very valuable. Just hold on to your homes. But it was the best period of time that they've ever had, and we're going to do that again. So we did so well in 2016 to 2020 that we couldn't talk about it. I would go and tell my people, why don't you talk about the border? They say, sir, nobody cares about the border because we fixed it. I said, let's talk about the fact that we fixed it. Nobody cared about that either. All they knew is the border worked. And then these guys got in here. I won't say how, but you know how. And the whole thing blew up everywhere, not only the border. Border is one of the real bad ones because you have some real bad people coming into our country. But these guys got in, and the economy went haywire, and inflation went through the roof. And inflation was caused by energy. You know, it was really caused largely by energy. Now everything is so inflated. And then when it goes to 4%, like recently, it was at 4.2%. But what about the 27% that it lifted over a short period of 2.5 years, where people they're dying. They can't live. Inflation is known as a country buster. It busts countries. This is for hundreds of years. You go back to old Germany. You go back to any country that's had inflation. It breaks up the country. And we've had the worst inflation we've had in 72 years, caused by energy, but now it's everything. So I just want to tell you, I love this state. We won the state twice. We won 2 primaries and 2 races by landslides. So I can't say that anything bad about the state of Texas. If I did, that governor right there would rip me off the stage. He'd rip me. I'd be, and you don't know how strong he is. I've seen him move into a chair once. I said, Governor, you are stronger than anybody I've ever seen. He's an incredible guy and an incredible man. But we're going to make that job very easy for you, Governor. You're going to go back to normal governing, things like streets and education and medical, and you're not going to have to worry about the border anymore, Governor. Your people have been so incredible. You're not going to have to worry about the border in Texas or in Arizona or anywhere else where it's such a complete disaster. So I just want to thank everybody for being here. Tremendous people, tremendous state. We love it very much, and I'm honored by the governor's endorsement. That's a big endorsement. He's not free and easy with endorsements. You look at his record. You don't do too many endorsements, I have to tell you that, Governor. So this meant a lot to me, and it's an honor to have come here and to accept it. And it's an honor to be with everybody today. And we are going to go out and we're going to make America great again. It's very simple. We're going to make America great again. Thank you. Thank you very much. Thank you very much.
Presidential Library, where we're continuing to remember the life of Rosalynn Carter and the impact she had in Georgia, across the nation and the world. The center announced her passing this afternoon. She was 96. And Andrew Young had a special relationship with the Carter family.
Of course, there was the Georgia connection. Then President Jimmy Carter appointed him ambassador to the United Nations. Channel 2's Larry Spruill spoke to Ambassador Young about the former First Lady's legacy. He continues our live Team 2 coverage tonight, live from the King Center. Larry.
And Linda, it's no secret that Ambassador Young had a very close relationship with Dr. King as well. But tonight, he is talking about his strong friendship with the Carter family, especially the former First Lady.
I don't know a more faithful, loyal, and devoted couple.
Former UN ambassador and former Atlanta Mayor Andrew Young says his friendship with former President Jimmy Carter and former First Lady Rosalynn Carter started years ago while he was an UN ambassador.
She was the first president's wife that I know of that regularly sat in on cabinet meetings. And she took notes, and I'm sure she discussed it with her husband when it was over.
Young says she was a woman of very little words, but when she spoke, former President Carter listened.
She was always there. And she was very supportive. She was very candid. She didn't hesitate to disagree with him or challenge him.
Young tells me she worked hard on a lot of things, from Habitat for Humanity to mental health. Dr. Bernice King with the King Center released this statement. It says in part, Ms. Carter was a powerful and strong force in President Carter's life and was often his most ardent advisor on many of the issues facing our nation during and after his presidency. Young believes Ms. Carter will ultimately be remembered as
a great woman and a wonderful wife. And you can't ask for much more than that.
And yet so much more than that. Channel 2's Larry Spruill joins us back live from the King Center. Larry, the former ambassador must have years of memories with the Carters.
Yeah, and he tells me that her legacy will live on for a very long time. But one of his favorite memories is when she went to Africa. He says he appreciates the work that she completed in Africa. Linda?
She took on some big human rights issues all around the world. Larry, thank you.
And because of all that, we know that many of you at home are looking to send your condolences to the former First Family. The Carter Center has set up this tribute website to honor Rosalind. You can find the family's official online condolence book and opportunities for memorial gifts, as well as an official biography and downloadable photos. We have it for you on the web link section of our website. Much more, too, of the passing of the former First Lady, WSBTV.com. That includes a photo gallery, too, of her life through the years, so make sure to click on that, and more of her enduring love story with former President Jimmy Carter.
And more on that. ABC News' Steve Osunsami had the Carters' final television interview together back in 2021. It was their 75th anniversary.
It was miraculous to watch that interaction. Instead of current events, they talked about love and how to make relationships last.
Well, choose the right person to marry. And then give each other plenty of space. Let the other person, have a full life in the way they choose. And help when you can. Share things a lot.
And do things together. We always looking to do things, find things we can do together.
And every night we try to make sure we are completely reconciled from all the arguments during the day when we go to bed. So we also read the Bible every night. And we've done that for 60 years probably.
It's hard to go to sleep if you've read, angry if you've read the Bible.
Oh, that just breaks my heart knowing that love story and how they were there for each other. What decades to have stories about.
And so many fun memories, too. Atlanta Braves fans,
yes,
Hawks fans. They were
that's
caught on
right.
the Kiss Cam just a couple of years ago.
And they love a parade.
A beautiful love story. Well, we're going to get you to the weather right now. It is a big week with Thanksgiving. A lot of people have plans. Meteorologist Ashley Kramlich is live in Severe Weather Center, too. And you're telling us about rain.
Yeah, we actually have multiple chances for rain this week. Kind of an active weather pattern. I know a lot of people are planning on traveling, so you need to take it slow if you're going to be leaving in the early parts of the week. Let's talk about what it looks like outside right now. Over Hartsfield, Jackson, all quiet at the moment, still pretty mild. Temperature currently here at 57. These numbers, they're going to fall back into the low 50s tomorrow morning. We're going to have more clouds rolling in. So not quite as cool as what we saw over the weekend for our mornings. We'll be at about 53 here in Atlanta, 50 over in Gainesville to begin the day. Throughout the day, the clouds are going to stay put for the most part. We're also going to have a pretty decent easterly wind, and that's going to keep the moisture with us. So we're going to tap into about a 20% chance for an isolated shower throughout the day. We'll make it up to highs in those upper 60s. But yes, winds will be gusty at times. Could be gusting anywhere out of the east at about 20, potentially up to 25 miles an hour. So a breezier Monday in store for us. As we roll the clocks into Tuesday, starting really Monday night into early Tuesday morning, a strong cold front will be approaching us. Heavy rainfall likely through Tuesday morning as we roll the clocks into Tuesday afternoon. Most of that rain with this latest model update showing to be on the eastern side of town. And then this all moves on out of here by Tuesday evening. So if you have plans to leave Tuesday morning, it may be a little bit of a soggy start for you. On top of that, our severe weather threat looks to be pretty low with this because it is going to be moving in throughout the morning hours. Most of the energy with this system is going to be well to the north of us. but I do expect to see some very heavy rainfall out of this, especially for areas north of Atlanta. That is some good news here. That is where we've seen the worst of the drought, really up in the North Georgia mountains, and we can take any rain we can get out of this. This isn't the only chance of rain, though, in the forecast as well. We can see anywhere between about 1 to 2 inches of rain possible. As we go into the end of the week, another chance of rain will be arriving as well. So your 5-day forecast with your weekend always in view. Mild for our Monday. The rain really rolling in Tuesday morning, drying up by Tuesday afternoon into Tuesday evening, and then the cold air following in behind this. Highs dropping down to the 50s. Another chance of rain rolls in Friday. It is out of here just in time for the weekend, but we'll stay with those highs in those upper 50s.
Mrs. Carter was a significant figure in Georgia for decades. So tonight, I talk with former Channel 2 Action News anchor John Pruitt, who covered her for much of that time, about her influence.
And as we remember Rosalynn Carter, we're looking at how she spent her time out of the spotlight, especially in her hometown of Plains.
I'm Channel 2. Of course, have been communications between our ships within the region where there are, moments where, there is deconfliction used. I think you're more specifically asking on like a high level.
That higher level phone that was set up a number of years ago and it was used on and off, but had.
Yeah, I just didn't want you to think like while there have not been high-level mill-to-mill communications between the secretary and his counterpart, at lower levels in theater, there have been communications to deconflict from crises. Idris.
2 questions. First, yesterday, President Biden made a bunch of remarks about Israel. And one of the ones he made was he talked about how doctors and nurses were now being allowed to Al-Shifa, but then added that, quote unquote, what was occurring before with indiscriminate bombing by the Israelis. Do you agree with President Biden that there were indiscriminate bombings by Israel, or with Israel that was saying that their bombings were precision strikes?
Well, I can't remember his exact context, but I think what he was referring to, and I'm not looking at the remarks, but was that we didn't want to see indiscriminate bombing around or into the hospital. So what the IDF did was go into the hospital with more precision. It wasn't, I think the president referenced this, there wasn't carpet bombing around the hospital or at the hospital itself. So I don't disagree with what the president said or in his remarks, but I think what you saw when it came to the Al-Shifa hospital in particular is that the IDF was going in with more precision, and we said all along from this podium and from others across the administration that we never wanted to see a firefight within the hospital. We never wanted to see innocent civilians get caught in those crossfires, and so I think that's what the president was speaking to.
And then secondly, I think in your last briefing you said that Hamas and PIJ were operating a command and control node from Al-Shifa Hospital. The Israelis have put out several videos over the past 24 hours of evidence of what they say, are Hamas weapons, a couple of machine guns, etc., but no real evidence of any command and control nodes in the traditional sense. Do you still stand by your assessment, and have you asked the Israelis to provide evidence of that?
Yeah, well, we still stand by the assessment that I think I read out on Tuesday, which what you're referring to is that we know Hamas has used hospitals like Al-Shifa to operate out of to conceal their military operations. I mean, taking a step back, a hospital should never be used for that to begin with. So however you define it, a command and control center node, a means of operating terrorist actions out of a hospital, that should never happen to begin with. We stand by the downgraded intelligence that I announced on Tuesday that we know they were using Al-Shifa Hospital. We know that they use other hospitals in the region when it comes to conducting their terrorist organizations and attacks. And so, yes, we stand by that, but we know, and you, I think, alluded to get it.
Plan on releasing any evidence to that intelligence?
I'm not going to get ahead of anything right now. I don't have anything to preview, but if we do, you will be the first to know. Liz.
Thank you. There have been 58 attacks on U.S. forces in Iraq and Syria over the last month. There's been 7.
We are thinking about the Carter family tonight. Rosalynn Carter was a major supporter of her husband when he was governor, then running for president, and then president.
Tonight I spoke with former Channel 2 Action News anchor John Pruitt who called her a steel magnolia.
John, it's so great to have you on here because you covered them for decades. And really, the kind of first lady Rosalynn was a first of its kind.
In many respects, she was certainly among the strongest first ladies, both in terms of the Georgia governor's mansion and the White House. A loving companion, a teammate. No major decisions were made by President or Governor Carter without bringing in Rosalynn to get her imprimatur on what he was doing. So she was an equal partner, a loving partner. They were a team. It's hard to imagine them not being together.
So hard. And the reality is one of her causes, her most important cause, mental health, before people even talked about it. This was the 70s.
I think her standing contribution to American society, the world society really, is her strides toward mental health, removing the stigma of mental health, which was always one of her primary objectives. And to get the insurance industry, for example, to cover mental health issues the way they do medical issues. The conferences she had, the awareness she raised. This will be one of her many lasting contributions to what is a wonderful legacy for Rosalynn Carter.
And a legacy that you saw develop over the decades. John Pruitt, journalist here at WSB TV for decades. Thank you so much for your time.
Thank you.
And before we go, we're hearing from Rosalynn Carter in her own words on her role as First Lady and her impact behind the scenes.
Portions of Channel 2 Action News are brought to you by Atlanta Toyota.
Today was amazing. Today was amazing.
Today was amazing.
Today was amazing. But my favorite part?
And then when the events of October 7th happened and the need to assess what we could supply Israel, we were informed very much by the results of the audit from, our looking all across the entire building here, but also what we had provided for Ukraine. So again, it's a complicated process and it's a complicated undertaking that this building has done, but we feel confident in what we are learning each time. Natasha. Yeah.
The Pentagon keeps saying that there have been no serious injuries from these attacks, but more than 24 service members have suffered traumatic brain injury, which seems like a very serious injury. So I'm just wondering, how are you defining that and how are you defining unsuccessful? And then my second question is if you have any updates on the search and recovery efforts for the 5 special operations soldiers who died last week.
Yeah. I'll take the last one first. So of course, I can't remember if I addressed this last time, but that's our thoughts and prayers are of course with the families who lost their loved ones over this last weekend in a training incident. In terms of any updates on those service members, I would refer you to the Army. They would have the latest for you. In terms of the injuries, again, I know TBI, of course, that's something that anytime one of our service members is injured, whether it's serious or not, we certainly take it seriously as a department. 2 of our service members did go to launch school for further evaluation. They were returned to duty soon after. So of course we take any injuries seriously, but these were not serious injuries. And I think that's important to remember on these attacks, that these attacks have been largely unsuccessful, that they have not damaged significant infrastructure. And as a result, the United States took military action 3 different times and fully degraded some of their facilities. So I think in terms of our response, we've been very effective in responding back and sending a message to Iran. Constantine.
Thanks, Sabrina. On the Hudner,
Sure.
Can you say how close the drone got to the ship?
I can't say how close it got. I don't actually know how close it got, but it got close enough to the ship that the commander felt that it needed to engage the drone.
Sure. And can you say what weapon system the ship used to engage the drone?
I can. Yeah.
Go back to the audit, the famous failed verb. It got a disclaimer.
I was surprised.
Loyal and compassionate.
She gave a voice to people who needed an advocate and told us all we can make a difference too. Rosalynn Carter talks about her life in her own words. We leave you with this.
I never dreamed I'd be First Lady, and I had a lot to learn. And I had some good help along the way, and she will too. It's like with my mental health program, I could get attention of Congress, of people who made the decisions. I was not always pleased with their reactions to my request, but at least it focused attention on the issue, and that was good. And we go to Africa, I get so tired, I'm not going again. And the next time, but something so wonderful happened. I mean, you see children who grew because we gave them medicine, or people who have latrines. It's so exciting that the next time I'm ready to go again. But living with Jimmy Carter has been an adventure. He makes the major decisions. He always consults me, and I always give him my advice, and we do work things out together. But he's the one who has done things, and I just helped him. Well, millions are still suffering, but I hope I have helped a little bit.
And you referenced the intelligence assessment. When you talk about this, can you be more specific? Or based on your assessment, do you have any proof that Hamas used the building itself, which is a big building, or are you referring to the underneath the building in conducting these activities?
Well, I think if I'm not mistaken, you can correct me, but I think Al-Shifa Hospital actually has multiple buildings. So what we know is Hamas was using Al-Shifa Hospital. I can't tell you specifically if it was just one building or multiple, but they were using the hospital to operate out of. That should stand alone as a place of concern. You have many injured civilians getting treatment there. You have babies who are just born. I don't think operating a terrorist cell out of a hospital is a way to conduct any operation, but they were doing that. So it's important to point that out. But in terms of more specifics on where in the hospital, that I don't have. That's still something that I've seen. The IDF is there and doing their assessment of where the Hamas leadership was operating out of. But what I can say and what I've said before is that we know that they were operating out of that hospital.
And thank you. And then. And you said we don't want to see a firefight inside the hospital.
Yeah, I said that on Tuesday. Yeah.
And again today. So the Israelis raided the hospital. There was no firefight because they didn't find any Hamas fighters. Does the Pentagon support these types of activities by the IDF raiding hospitals?
Well, look, that's something for the IDF to really speak to. We have been very clear with our Israeli counterparts, with Minister Gallant. The Secretary has engaged with him almost regularly, almost daily, that innocent civilians people in hospitals that are seeking care. Their lives need to be protected, and they need to be, that the IDF, as they conduct their operations, need to uphold humanitarian laws and the law of war. But that's how complex and complicated this entire operation is for the IDF. The fact that you have a terrorist organization embedded, or at least using and operating out of a hospital, that makes any operation for any military in the world incredibly complex. And so that's something that the IDF would have to speak to in terms of their operations, but we never want to see any type of terrorist organization operating out of a hospital, using it as a command and control center, because that does put innocent lives at risk. And that's what they were doing. They're putting these people, using them as human shields, you know, for what? And so I think it's just important. You raise an excellent question, but I think it's also important to remember why these people were put in that position to begin with. Wafa. Yeah.
Thank you, Sabrina. So can you please update us on the department level of engagement in daily military operations in Gaza? And also when you say you're engaged, like there's daily interaction, or you reach out to the Israelis on a daily basis, do they actually listen to you when you express concerns or ask questions about the military operations?
Sure. So as you mentioned, and I've said, we do have daily conversation, or near daily conversations with the Israeli government. That's from the secretary. But of course, there are levels all across this government that are also having those conversations. I'm not going to go into more details of those conversations, other than, you know, we do put out a readout each time. You can certainly see a common thread of what we're emphasizing in those readouts, that yes, Israel has the absolute right to defend itself against the horrific terrorist attack that happened on October 7th. But of course, we are urging, as always, in every single call, that humanitarian laws, innocent civilians must be taken into account for any operation. You know, we do feel like they've been receptive to us. They continue to engage in our calls, and that's a good sign. We want to keep those lines of communication open. And I'm sorry, you had a first question that I...
The level of engagement, the department level of engagement in the daily operation.
Sure, so from the secretary, and then of course there are levels below him that engage with their Israeli counterparts. It's not just from the secretary's level. Of course, we have our policy team here. The joint staff engages, you know, on their side. So it's multiple levels, not just happening at the secretary level.
I'm sorry.
Yeah, sorry.
So when you say you have daily discussions, and can you please give us a sense about like how the like what's next? What are the goals of the Israelis? What's the way ahead in Gaza? Like when on day 41 or 42, I believe, and the Israelis couldn't achieve much, but killing civilians so far. So do they share their goals with you on a daily basis?
So again, I'm not going to get into the private conversations. We have readouts that we put out after every call, and then we have engagements below the secretary's level that continue at all different levels, and, you know, pretty regularly. I'm just not going to get into any further details of those calls. We're not the IDF, we're not on the ground, we're not in their operations, but we certainly ask the questions that we feel that we need to ask. We push where we feel that we need to push, and that's what good partners do. And so I'll just leave it at that. Chris? Oh, did you have one more? Okay, one more and then I'll go to Chris. Yeah.
So I want to ask you about if you still have the same level of concern about a wider conflict in the region, even though like Hezbollah didn't show intentions to really engage in a comprehensive war with Israel so far.
Yeah, we absolutely have concerns of this widening out to a wider regional conflict, which is why we have positioned the assets in the region that we have, with our 2 carrier strike groups, with more aircraft in the region, with the 26 MU also there, that remains untasked, but, you know, ready in case needed. Absolutely, that's why we're concerned, and that's why you saw the secretary, at the direction of the president, surge these assets to the region to make a statement, and to make a statement to Iran that getting involved or seeking a wider regional conflict is not the right course of action. Now I'll go to Chris. Yeah.
Thank you, Sabrina.
Yeah.
I just wanted to pick apart the degrade versus deterrence element of these airstrikes. You said they were significantly degraded, these malicious capabilities. If the department deems these, and the president deems these strikes are necessary in the future, how feasible is it for the United States to destroy, blow up enough of their capabilities that even if they want to, they can't attack U.S. forces?
Well, that's just getting into details that I'm not going to speak to because that gets to also an intelligence assessment. So what I can say is that when you were asking about degraded versus deterrence, I mean, we degraded these facilities enough that they can't use them anymore. So they're completely destroyed. So the ammunition or the weapons storage facility that is in Syria that we just hit this past Sunday, those weapons are no longer usable. That means that whatever groups were using those and wanting to inflict harm or more attacks on our troops can't use them anymore. So that's completely degraded their ability of at least another site to inflict damage on our troops. Joseph, yeah.
Thanks. One on the drone, the MQ-9. Can the Pentagon publicly attribute that to the Houthis, that they launched that drone?
I think we know it came from Yemen. Again, we're still doing an assessment of the attribution, but I would have no reason to doubt that it would have come from the Houthis, but it's, not like they sent a note with it.
Sure. Yeah. All right, and the second one on Israel, senior.
Maybe that was more flippant than I needed to be, but you know what I mean. Like, we're still doing an assessment of the ownership of, who launched the drone, but we do know it came from Yemen.
And earlier today, a senior defense official said that this department is involved in tracking civilian casualties in Gaza, obviously as a result of both sides, but also the Israeli strikes in Gaza. If CivCA is involved, can you elaborate at all? And is there a report that's going to be coming out? I mean, we're over a month into the conflict now.
I'm not sure what you're referencing by keeping track of civilian casualties in Gaza. I haven't.
Based on U.S. military support to.
I haven't seen that. I mean, again, we do our own assessments, but I have nothing to read out of as we get information. Again, we're not on the ground here. We know that the health ministry does put out civilian casualty numbers, but that is run by Hamas. So we have to, of course, take that with a bit of a grain of salt here. But I don't have an independent assessment on our side that we're doing right now.
Are you guys asking the Israelis to try? I mean, obviously, they can't keep track of every single one when they're this high, the number. But are you guys asking them to keep track?
That's something that is going to be very difficult to keep track of. And that's not something that I think we're directing them to do, but something that I think most armies, in their operations would keep track of just, general casualties, but we're not asking for a count every day. Again, we do our own assessments, but I just don't have anything more for you on that. Yeah.
North Korea announced that they successfully test a solid fuel engine for intermediate range ballistic missile. So do you think that this engine is related to the Russian technology North Korea may receive from Russia?
That I couldn't speculate on. I'm not sure. Yeah. Yes.
Thank you, Sabrina. The Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu, he shared a detailed animation and the IDF as well of the Shifa hospital and a detailed drawing of the Hamas possible garrisons underneath the hospital building.
Okay.
So far we saw only a couple of videos established by or broadcasted by the IDF social media, shows us a couple of assault rifles only. Since you have very close contact with your Israeli counterparts, do you have any information about solid proof of these animations that the Israeli Prime Minister shared before?
I can't speak to the animations or video that you're speaking about. I just haven't seen it, so it's hard for me to respond to exactly what you're referencing. We were very clear on when I came out on Tuesday, and can reiterate that we know that the hospital was used as a operation center for Hamas. They were using it. They had their, I don't know if leadership, but they had militants in there operating out of the hospital. But I don't have more for you in terms of what you're referencing in terms of the video. Sorry. Yeah.
I have a couple on Ukraine. So could you please provide a preview of the next Ukraine Defense Contact Group meeting? I believe it's going to be the last meeting this year. So what's the focus going to be on? And do you expect to hear any announcement about new aid packages, et cetera?
So I don't have an announcement yet for the next Ukraine Defense Contact Group, but you know that they meet monthly, and so I think we should expect an announcement within the next few days of when the next one will be. In terms of aid packages, you've seen us roll out pretty consistently aid packages for Ukraine. We have had to parse down our support and our security assistance for Ukraine because we don't have additional funding because the supplemental hasn't been passed. So we just rolled out our last presidential drawdown authority, and I believe that was last week. Look, when we're ready to roll out the next one, we certainly will. We know that Ukraine continues to face and continues to endeavor in its counteroffensive, and they need continued support on a regular basis. So we know that we have to do that. We know that we have to continue to meet their needs. And that's something that certainly will be discussed at the next Ukraine Defense Contact Group. But in terms of a package preview, I just don't have more for you to announce today.
And for how long can you support Ukraine until before the Congress looks into new funding? Because like the last packages were like thinner and thinner, we saw.
Well, that's because we don't have a supplemental. I mean, frankly, that is why we requested an emergency supplemental package to provide funding for, security assistance to Ukraine and also to backfill our own stocks. The supplemental, again, is in Congress. We continue to urge Congress to pass a supplemental. It's, a supplemental is put forward and packaged together because it's an emergency request. It's not part of the budget process. And so we have a large amount that we want Congress to authorize for Ukraine and for Israel and for our investments in the Indo-Pacific and, of course, for our own investments in our defense industrial base. So that's something that we're going to continue to urge Congress to pass. But you're absolutely right. You have seen smaller packages because we need to parse these out. Because we don't know when Congress is going to pass our supplemental package. And so we're continuing to talk with allies and partners. We're not the only country here contributing to Ukraine's urgent battlefield needs. As you know, the Ukraine Contact Group is over 50 nations. So it's not that it's just the U.S. supporting Ukraine, but the president has been very clear that we are going to stand with Ukraine for as long as it takes. And so that means Congress passing our supplemental request, and we hope that they do that soon.
For how long do you think you still have them before Congress looks into that? Like it's going to be weeks, months, or?
Yeah, well, again, each package varies by dollar amount. So you've seen some smaller packages. I'm not going to forecast how long that's going to last. That certainly wouldn't do the Ukrainians any good. That would really benefit the Russians. And so I'm just not going to be able to, give you a timeline on how long we're going to be able to have these packages continue to go forward. But what I can say, and what I will continue to say, is that we need Congress to pass that supplemental request. Yes.
You keep talking about the intelligence in the past tense, that the intelligence believes Hamas has used hospitals. Do you have intelligence that they currently are?
I have only the intelligence that I read out, the downgraded intelligence that I read out yesterday, on Tuesday. Past tense, present tense, I don't want to parse out words here, but we know that Hamas has been using the hospital, the Al-Shifa hospital, and other hospitals in Gaza. I'm not going to get into more specifics on, what they're doing now, whereabouts, all of that. We know that the IDF has taken control of Al-Shifa Hospital, so I don't have more to share with you on that front.
It matters because under international law, you have to have proof that a combatant is currently, right then in that moment, in the hospital in order to strike.
Yeah, again, when I read out the downgraded material, we felt very confident that Hamas was using that hospital to conduct its operations. And as you saw in open source, there have been evidence of that the IDF is showing now.
Well, and that's what I want to ask you. How would you characterize the video that the IDF released? They said it's irrefutable proof that Hamas was there. Does the U.S. agree?
I don't think we're disputing that Hamas was using Al-Shifa Hospital. I mean, I read that out on Tuesday. I said very specifically, Al-Shifa is one of many hospitals in Gaza that Hamas uses to operate out of and to conduct their operations out of. So I'll let the IDF speak to their broader assessment. I mean, they're still ongoing right now, but I just don't have more for you or more intelligence to share, and I'm frankly not going to do it from this podium.
Sorry, just one more. So you're saying that the video of a blurred laptop, a flak jacket, a handful of rifles, that backs up what you've been saying, that Hamas is operating in the hospital?
I'm happy to repeat what I said on Tuesday, but the downgraded intelligence that I read out on Tuesday and that I will reiterate again today is that Hamas uses Al-Shifa being one of them, but hospitals in Gaza to conduct and to operate out of and to further execute on terrorist actions within Gaza.
Does that video back that up?
Again, I'm just going to leave it at that. Thanks. Do you have a question back here? Oh, sorry. Yes.
Thank you, Sabrina. Regarding to the, as you mentioned that there were like 58 attacks against U.S. service members since 17th of October. So do you have any plans to change your booster in Iraq and Syria, especially most of these attacks happens in these two countries? And how do you see the Iraqi government respond or react to protect these spaces? Do you believe they have the ability to protect these spaces? Thank you.
So I think your question was on force posture changes within Syria and Iraq. So I don't have any force posture changes to announce, but as you know, I can't remember the date, but we did announce that we were moving Patriot and THAAD batteries into the region to help protect our troops with more air defense. So that's something that we have done to bolster our protection measures of our service members in both Iraq and Syria and elsewhere. And all the Patriot batteries are there and fully running, and the THAAD battery, I believe, is still making its way over. But I don't have any more force posture movements to announce.
What about the Iraqi government? Do you think they have the ability to protect the bases that where the U.S. troops are being, like in Anbar or in the north of Iraq?
Yes, we continue to work with the Iraqi government and their military in terms of protecting our troops. We are in Iraq at the invitation of the Iraqi government, so we certainly work with them and partner with them, and they're, the secretary has had calls with his counterpart on making sure that our service members are protected in those areas, and we continue to engage them in those conversations. Okay, thank you.
Just to
sure.
follow up on that.
And then we gotta wrap. Sorry.
Yeah, Tuesday you said 55 attacks since October
Yes.
17. We're hearing different numbers. Is that what's the latest?
Sorry, I can give you that rundown. So as of today, there have been approximately 58 attacks. So that's 27 in Iraq and 31 attacks in Syria.
30 since Tuesday?
Yeah.
You have time for one more quick. I'll be quick.
Okay,
Right.
Fadi.
Yeah,
One
no,
more.
I
but then I feel like I have to do Tony. So okay, I'll do these two, and then I gotta wrap it up.
Give it to you. You're very generous with your time. Based on the intelligence that was recently downgraded that you talked about on Tuesday, and based on any other information that is available to you, how recent did Hamas leadership use Al-Shifa Hospital?
Well, that would get into further intelligence assessments that I just can't get into from here. Again, as I mentioned earlier, and I told you, we feel very confident that Hamas was using Al-Shifa and other hospitals to conduct operations out of. But just in terms of when, where, all of that, more specifics, I just can't get into those details. Did you have a question?
PDA issue. Just to clarify for the record and for those watching, doesn't the Pentagon have about $4.9 billion of authority left? For PDAs, they just don't have. They got like $1 billion left to replace their equipment, but you can give like $4.9 billion in PDAs going forward.
Yeah, I'm not trying to minimize it. I'm just trying to tell you that yes, we do have $4.9 billion from the recalculated PDA funds that we continue to draw down of. That's what we're using, but we only have 1.1, I believe, left to restock our own inventories. And so, again, we know Ukraine is going to need more than that. Right. And so that's why we did submit that supplemental request. And a lot of that supplemental will be used also to replenish our own stocks.
I just want to make the point that it's not getting cut off the aid. You got $4 billion, only $5 billion left to play out, however long that goes.
Yep, that's correct. Yeah, thank you. All right, thanks, everyone.
Really?
Matt?
No?
I
Well,
see you writing out your questions. Do you need a minute?
No, it's such a quiet news day.
So I wanted to defer to your questions for you to ask about.
Not quiet news day.
For you to ask about all of it.
I'm surprised you don't have anything to start with, but that's okay. Let me begin with something about Gaza. And this is the letter that was signed today by the heads of a number of UN agencies as well as NGOs, and that opposes the creation of a safe zone or safe zones in southern Gaza, and also calls for an immediate ceasefire. I suppose none of that is particularly surprising, but I wanted to ask you about the fact that there are at least 3 American citizens, 3 Americans who are signatories to this, who are heads of UN agencies, who this administration nominated, supported, and lobbied for to win their positions, who signed this. And so the first thing on that is...
Go ahead.
Well,
I don't think
they're no longer, they are not employed by the U.S. government.
Can I say factual? Correct me if I'm wrong. I don't think it calls for an immediate ceasefire. Correct.
Calls for a ceasefire. I'll go back and look.
I'm happy to be proven wrong if I read the letter quickly this morning, but I don't think it calls for an immediate ceasefire. But anyway, go ahead.
Well, anyway,
I may have that detail wrong.
I might have it wrong as well, and I'm sorry if I do. But at any rate, the content of the letter is not in alignment with what the administration's policy is right now. Obviously, these 3 people that I'm focusing on are not employed or employees of the U.S. government, and so they don't necessarily take their direction from the administration. So one, they didn't clear or let you know in advance that they were going to sign this?
So I'm not aware whether we had conversations with them in advance of this letter. I would say we, of course, supported all those nominees, as you point out, and support their ability and right and authority to make their independent judgments about what is the best policy. I will say one thing about what the letter calls for with respect to safe zones. I think the letter points out that they are opposed to safe zones in which there is not agreement from all the parties not to attack those safe zones. I think the point they're making is if you direct people to go to safe areas, they have to be sure that those areas actually will be safe and not just targets for the civilians who have been moved there.
You're saying targets from...
Targets. The civilians won't be targets.
These are Israeli proposed safe. This is an Israeli proposed safe area.
What we are working on with the Israelis, and we've had conversations about this in the last 24 hours, is about what is the best way to implement protection for civilians in southern Gaza. And we continue to work through those details. I don't have any announcements to make about where we might land, but it's a conversation that's ongoing with the Israeli government right now.
Okay. Then just more broadly, because we're all aware of the foment inside the administration and inside Washington and inside the country about what the policy is, but these are three prominent people, including 2 of which, Kathy Russell and Amy Pope, had senior positions at the White House. Kathy Russell is still, as far as I understand, extremely close to both the president and the first lady. And then Cindy McCain, who everyone knows who she is. Is it problematic for you guys at all that you have these 3 people who are, the heads of important UN agencies who are disagreeing with the administration's policy?
Again, I don't necessarily agree that they are disagreeing with our policy. We want to see that whatever protections exist for civilians in southern Gaza, that there are areas that are protected from attacks from Israel, from Hamas, Palestinian Islamic Jihad, from anyone else operating there. So we would agree with that notion, and it's something we're working with the Israeli government to try to implement and figure out the details of now.
So the administration does not support the creation of a safe zone. I thought that was one of the main things the Secretary was doing.
We do want to establish areas that are safe for civilians in southern Gaza, but working out the details of that when you have an armed conflict going on is complicated, as it always is in the middle of armed conflict.
Okay. So you're not particularly concerned about that?
Not at all.
Okay.
Go ahead.
Related, but not totally. Of course, there's the operations in Al-Shifa Hospital. There are also operations surrounding another hospital, which I think the name was Ali Arab. There's been strikes on the Jordanian military hospital in Gaza. All hospitals, is it still your understanding that there would be Hamas commands in all those hospitals? And more generally, again, I repeat, is it a legitimate thing to hit or strike or attack or what have you?
So let me say a few things about that. First, just as a matter, we never said that there were command posts in all of the hospitals. We said that it is our assessment that there are command posts in hospitals. We did make a specific assessment as it related to Al-Shifa, but we did not say that there are command posts in every hospital in Gaza. But there are command posts in hospitals there, and there are tunnels underneath hospitals there. Let me speak first of all to the Jordanian medical personnel that were injured outside a field hospital in Gaza. We are deeply concerned that they were injured. The Jordanian government has done incredible work establishing this field hospital and other medical facilities in Gaza. We think they're essential and they must be protected. That work must be allowed to continue, and we reiterate the obligations under international humanitarian law for all parties to take feasible precautions to reduce the risk of harm to civilians, and we urge all possible steps to mitigate civilian harm. As it relates to hospitals, as we've said before, we don't want to see hospitals struck from the air. We understand that Hamas does continue to use hospitals as places where they embed their fighters. It's places where they have tunnels running underneath. And so it can be appropriate for Israel to conduct limited military operations with respect to hospitals, but we want to see them do it in a way that minimizes civilian casualties. We do not want to see hospitals in the middle of firefights. We do not want to see patients put at risk. It's why we've called for the evacuation of hospitals when appropriate and said we would support international humanitarian organizations evacuating patients so they could be put out of harm's way. This is, I think as I said before, this is such a difficult issue because two things can be true at one time. One, we want to see hospitals protected. Two, Hamas is operating outside of hospitals, and Israel has a right to try to attack Hamas and hold them accountable and keep them from launching new attacks. So how do you square those two things? The way we try to square it is to say, number one, no airstrikes on hospitals, and number two, if Israel is going to conduct limited military operations in hospitals, as they're doing with respect to Al-Shifa now, that they try to do it in a way that minimizes civilian harm, and so they only are putting in jeopardy Hamas fighters and not civilians. As is true every day, I will definitely. You know, I always come to you. So go ahead.
Just to follow up on that one specifically, so you say no airstrikes on hospitals. Well, there apparently was one on the military Jordanian hospital in Gaza. So you say you're deeply concerned, you don't want to see hospitals struck from the air, etc. But you condemn that strike.
I'm going to say we are concerned about those reports. We're concerned that hospitals hit, and we do not want to see airstrikes against hospitals. We want to see hospitals protected.
So you don't condemn. Yeah.
Would the U.S. support establishing safe zones?
I will. I'll come to you.
in northern Gaza?
I know. You can follow, and when I come to you, you can follow up on that and whatever else. You'll get as many as you need.
Would the U.S. support establishing safe zones in northern Gaza for things like field hospitals? I mean, you can't evacuate these people and put them, where they aren't going to be safe. So if you're calling for patients to be evacuated, field hospitals would de facto be the best option, but if they're not safe either, I mean, how is the U.S. approaching this?
I don't want to speak to try to prescribe specific proposals from the podium when this is an ongoing conversation we are having with the government of Israel and with international humanitarian organizations who themselves are trying to figure out the best way to implement this in what is an active conflict zone. I will just reiterate the general principles, which is we do want to see places established that civilians can be safe. We want to see places established where patients can be safe and patients are protected, and that's what we're in conversation every day with the government of Israel about, and with the international humanitarian organizations. And I will just repeat, as I've said the other day, remember that it is Hamas that is putting all of these people in harm's way. It is Hamas that continues to operate inside hospitals as they have done inside mosques and schools and other civilian infrastructure. It is the Hamas that is the root of all this problem, that is creating such a difficult challenge for the international community and for the Israeli military. So I don't have any illusions that Hamas is going to change its practices, so that puts an added burden on Israel to conduct their operations in compliance with international humanitarian law. And we expect them to meet those obligations, and we have conversations where we make that clear with them all the time.
Would you support safe zones established in northern Gaza? Because to this point, you've only mentioned southern Gaza.
Again, I'm not going to get ahead of the conversations that we're having with international humanitarian organizations about what the best way is to protect civilians from harm. It is an ongoing conversation, and I don't think I should try to prescribe where those conversations will land from here.
You said you're pressing Israel to conduct their operations within the confines of international humanitarian law. Have they done that to this point? Does the U.S. assess they've done that?
Again, we have not made any assessment that they have violated international humanitarian law, but we constantly are monitoring facts as they develop. Simon, go ahead.
Yeah, just on that particular issue, the president yesterday did talk about indiscriminate bombing. He said this is a different story than what I believe was occurring before an indiscriminate bombing. He's kind of talking about how the U.S. has been able to influence the way that the Israelis are conducting this campaign. So does that mean there was an assessment at some point that it was indiscriminate?
So as always, I will let the White House speak to the president's specific comments, but I think the point that he was making is that when you look at the way they have conducted their military operation around Al-Shifa, it has been a targeted operation to move slowly into the hospital. They're moving one building at a time. They have not. It's an operation that is yet ongoing. My understanding is they have not completed operations against every building in the hospital as of yet. It's something that's ongoing. And he was contrasting that with the airstrikes that Israel has conducted that even when targeted can produce significant collateral damage and loss of civilian life.
So indiscriminate is not this building's assessment?
It's not an assessment that we've made, and again, what I think the president was referring to was contrasting ground operations with airstrikes, which even when targeted, can produce significant civilian casualties, as we have unfortunately seen, and lead to loss of thousands and thousands of Palestinian lives.
Just back to Al-Shifa specifically, you had talked earlier in the week about a plan to evacuate patients. Obviously, the operation, the Israelis are now in the hospital, and there hasn't been an evacuation. So, was that something that you were trying to hold the Israelis back from going in there so that you could get people out? And can you, I guess, what happened? What went wrong?
We have not tried to dictate the tempo of military operations to Israel. We're not in any position to do that from thousands of miles away. They have to make their own decisions about how to best conduct a military campaign. We were liaising with humanitarian organizations about conducting evacuations. There have been evacuations that have been conducted from Al-Shifa and from other hospitals in the north. There weren't any that I was aware of this week in the last few days as this military operation took place. I'm not really in a position to comment on what's going on the ground right now. We don't have eyes and ears there, but no, there wasn't any significant evacuation that took place beforehand.
Finally, on you mentioned the hope that there can be these safer areas in the south of Gaza. The Israelis have started dropping leaflets on certain places around Khan Yunis. Are you concerned that basically the area that could be in some sense safe for civilians in Gaza is just shrinking and is basically going to be non-existent?
I will say we are in active conversations with the government of Israel about ensuring that civilians can be safe from harm. We obviously saw the step that they took with respect to Khan Yunis. They originally told people to move from the north to the south. We have been in conversation with them to impress upon them that as they continue to look at expanded military operations or ground operations in other ways, in other parts of Gaza, they need to ensure that they're safe, that there are humanitarian corridors for civilians, there's protection for civilians, there are human pauses so civilians can get themselves out of harm's way, and that we can get humanitarian assistance into them, and that there are ultimately places that they can be safe from harm. That is an active, ongoing conversation between our government and the government of Israel. Let me go to Saeed, because I did promise.
Thank you. I mean, you seem, and the administration, the president himself, seem to be certain that the Shifa was a headquarters for Hamas, although no evidence has been shown. You talked about tunnels. The Israelis have not been able to show any tunnels, but I don't want to get into that. So there's been absolutely not even a shred of evidence. They showed a backpack with one rifle.
I saw a host of rifles in videos.
Maybe they have police protecting the hospital.
I saw a host of assault rifles. I'm not aware that there's a sort of acceptable threshold level for assault rifles held in hospitals. It's not general humanitarian practice.
Well, I think there are police guards in most hospitals around the world. But let me go on with what the director of the hospital said today, Mohammed Abu Salmiya. He was speaking to Al Jazeera. I put the things in English. He said there are by the way, do you consider the hospital to be militarily occupied by Israel? Is it an occupied territory?
I don't have an assessment of that because I think there's an ongoing. Hold on, let's just try to establish a ground rule and then we'll continue. I will let you. I'm not going to interrupt your questions. Don't interrupt my answers. So to answer that question, there's an ongoing military operation as I understand it right now. I obviously cannot offer an assessment to the exact facts on the ground from here. We don't have eyes and ears on the ground there.
There are, according to the director of the hospital, there's 7,000 people at Shifa right now. They're under total siege. They destroyed something like 45 dialysis machines. There are 36 premature babies that probably are dead by now. But there's no food. There's nothing. So should the Israeli army that is currently roaming, as you suggested, roaming all buildings and all rooms and all corridors of the hospital, should they be responsible for the goodwill of these people that are in the hospital?
So, as I said, we expect Israel to comply with international humanitarian law, and to the extent they are taking territory in Gaza, of course we would expect them to ensure that patients are treated humanely, that patients have access to food, to water, to medical care. We absolutely would agree with that proposition.
To the best of your judgment, have they been doing that?
I don't. Again, I cannot speak to facts about what was a very actively evolving situation on the ground.
All right, the Israelis just destroyed this morning the last working flour mill in Gaza. It's where the only place where some flours are. Is that suspected to be a Hamas headquarters?
I again cannot speak to an individual strike where I don't have all the facts at my disposal.
I have just two more questions. One, I think just to follow up on Matt and others and so on have been saying, the American public is really opposed. They are for a ceasefire. They want a ceasefire. This is the first time that a ceasefire has become such a dirty word. So why not go along with the sentiment of the public? That would be quite democratic, wouldn't it?
So first of all, I've seen a number of polls about this very question, but it actually doesn't matter. We don't make our decisions based on polls. We make our decisions based on what we believe are the best foreign policy judgments on behalf of the American people and their national security interests. And the president and the secretary have come to the judgment that a ceasefire at this time would only benefit Hamas. But we have been very clear that we believe there should be expanded humanitarian pauses to protect civilians, that there should be ways for civilians to get out of harm's way, and that we should do everything we can to get humanitarian assistance in for civilians in Gaza. The secretary has spoken very clearly that in his judgment, far too many Palestinian civilians have been killed as a result of this conflict. Far too many children have been killed as a result of this conflict. There's a tragedy that has been inflicted upon the people of Gaza that is not of their own making. It's because Hamas launched a terrorist attack on October 7th. Israel has a right to conduct military operations to hold those terrorists accountable. We want them to do it in a way that minimizes civilian harm, and we want to do everything we can to get humanitarian assistance into civilians. And that is the work that we are doing every day to try to effectuate.
And lastly, by the way, history did not begin on October 7th, but let's not get into that. Do you have anything to say about a more mundane issue like the visa waiver?
So with respect to the visa waiver program, so we are aware of reports that there are American citizens in the West Bank who are unable to transit through Israel as they are allowed to do under the requirements of the visa waiver program. We have expressed concerns about that to the government of Israel. I won't get into the full details of our private diplomatic conversations, but we expect Israel to address those concerns. We expect them to be in full compliance with the visa waiver program, and there are remedial measures that that are available to us if they are not.
Okay, let's just, on that, like they could be suspended?
There are a full range of remedial measures that can be taken before ultimate suspension. That is, of course, for any country in the visa waiver program, the ultimate action that we can take. There are measures you can take to try to bring a country back into compliance. I can't get into the specifics from here. There are a range. Hold on. There are a range of measures. We can go into it in detail, but offline. But
okay,
go ahead.
But I mean, well, we can talk about this later. But. Literally, I mean, after October 7th, it was going to be literally impossible for Israel to continue to meet the criteria for this. Is what you're saying now that you have told when you're expressing your concerns to the Israelis, are you telling them that, hey, you're no longer in compliance with what you agreed to and fix it, or something's going to happen?
I am not going to get into the exact conversation that we have had, but we have expressed our concerns that American citizens in Israel or in the West Bank traveling through, that want to travel through Israel, cannot do so, cannot fully exercise their rights under the program. We expect them to be able to do so.
Are Israeli passport holders aware of the fact that the actions of their government may be, eliminate them from the program so that they would have to go back and get visas?
I don't know if they were before. They probably are now.
All right. And then just the other thing is that, yeah, you said the letter that I mentioned earlier didn't talk about a ceasefire.
Was I wrong about that?
Yeah.
Yeah, okay,
Yeah.
Go ahead.
We also renew our call for a humanitarian ceasefire to ease the suffering and to help facilitate humanitarian operations and the release of all hostages. You don't agree with that?
So
you think that that's not?
So
that's I'm quoting from the.
So you're right. They called it a ceasefire. We are for a humanitarian pause to allow the delivery of humanitarian assistance and ensure the release of all hostages. So you were right.
Humanitarian pause, like you got in the G7 statement.
Correct.
They said humanitarian ceasefire.
We would disagree. We disagree with a call for a ceasefire.
Okay, and so you
absolutely.
don't. And so, and that is still not a problem that you have two of whom are former senior White House officials, and one of whom, is well known, and not just because of who her husband was, but for her own work in her own right.
As I said,
publicly disagreeing with the administration, and this isn't like some 23-year-old kid who's got who's working upstairs and on the 4th floor or something like that. These are serious people.
As I said, we expect them to exercise their independent judgment, fully support their ability to do so. With respect to a ceasefire, oftentimes when ceasefire gets thrown around, it's the idea of a ceasefire that will lead to a full cessation of hostilities, a humanitarian pause. I understand it's called a ceasefire.
Are you suggesting that they don't really know what they're talking
about? No, there may. I don't want to get into the full details, but a short pause that would achieve the goals that they outlined is something that we would support, of course. Go ahead, Olivia.
Thank you, Matt. Just to clarify on these conversations that are ongoing about potential evacuations of hospitals, I just want to confirm that you do have interested humanitarian organizations, third parties that would be willing to effectuate these evacuations.
There are third parties who have expressed an interest to do so, and we have not, for a variety of reasons on the ground. Remember, they're both Israel and Hamas, who are parties to the conflict here. It's been impossible to ensure that they could move safely to conduct these evacuations.
Right. So can you offer any clarity? I mean, is it Hamas? Is it Israel? I mean, 2 days, you first mentioned these conversations were ongoing 2 days ago. 2 days is a long time for critically ill patients or premature babies, all of the patients who are caught in this.
So Israel has said publicly that they would welcome evacuation of patients. The problem has been Hamas.
Can I ask you about, to provide an update on the number of Americans who have been able to leave Gaza? How many have been able to leave? How many are left? And then if you could separately address how much aid has gotten in.
So we have nearly 700 American citizens, legal permanent residents, and family members who have gotten out of Gaza through Rafah Gate. There are a little under 900 who are left. Of that number, around 300 of them or so are American citizens, and the others are legal permanent residents and their family members. We're trying to get more out all the time and remain in contact with the American citizens and family members that are left. In terms of the amount of aid that has gotten in, so a couple things I want to say about that. Number one, yesterday, for the first time, fuel moved in to Gaza through Rafah Gate to allow the delivery of humanitarian assistance inside Gaza. So you have to remember there's two issues, right? One, I know you know this, but for everyone, you have to get the trucks moving in through Rafah to the Gaza side of the border. Once there, they unload into warehouses, and then you have to have humanitarian implementers that have trucks that take that and deliver the aid all around Gaza. And the implementers had run out of fuel to do that aid, and so we got fuel in yesterday to allow those delivery trucks to continue to do their work. But because the warehouses were full, no trucks moved in yesterday because they didn't have anywhere to unload. Fuel went in. Implementers have started emptying out the warehouses. Today, trucks have started to go back in through Gaza. As of yesterday, a total of around 1,100, a little over 1,100 trucks that had gotten in. None went in yesterday, but more are going through today, and I'm sure at the end of the day we'll have an update on how many got in.
Two quick follow-ups, sorry. So of the fewer than 900 Americans and family members who are left in Gaza, have any of them been killed or wounded while waiting to get out?
I don't have confirmed reports of that at this time.
So there are reports. You don't have confirmation.
We don't have confirmation. Yeah.
And then on the question of these deliveries, I mean, early on or earlier, I suppose, the goal was set to have at least 100 trucks coming in a day. I mean, obviously, we are falling very, very far short of that number. The secretary earlier discussed the possibility of Kerem Shalom opening or considering the opening of that crossing to deliver more aid. Why isn't that a more viable route?
We are continuing to talk. First of all, let me say the question is not really about the number of gates that are open to get into Israel. The question is about screening mechanisms and being able to screen the number of trucks. There's plenty of room for Rafah to get enough trucks through to deliver humanitarian assistance. The question has been getting those trucks screened, getting an appropriate number of trucks screened and in through Rafah. So we continue to work with the Israelis on an appropriate screening mechanisms. It's conversations that David Satterfield has been having on the ground with them. We continue to push. We don't have an agreement on it yet. It's taken longer than we wanted, but it's something we're very focused on and trying to get accomplished.
On fuel, please.
Go ahead.
Yeah. Yesterday, Israel only allowed some 24,000 liters of fuel, and the UN agency UNRWA says it is not enough, much more is needed, and it's the only equivalent of half a truck. And UNRWA's head Lazzarini also accused Israel of using fuel as a weapon of war. Do you agree that Israel is using fuel as a weapon of war? And can you update us on the U.S. efforts to get more fuel into Gaza?
So I would say we agree that more fuel needs to move into Gaza. We've been very clear about this. Publicly, we've been clear about it privately. We want fuel to move into Gaza, not just for the delivery of trucks, which is what the fuel, or the delivery of humanitarian assistance, which is what the fuel that went in yesterday would support. But we also want fuel to go in to power generators for hospitals. We want it to go in to power desalination. We want it to go in to power other humanitarian purposes. So we are very supportive of the delivery of fuel. It's something that we have actively pushed for with the Israeli government. The secretary had conversations with members of the Israeli government yesterday about it. Other members of the administration have had those conversations. It's something we are actively pushing for all the time. Yeah.
The UN Security Council yesterday adopted a resolution calling for extended humanitarian pause in Gaza. The US abstained from voting, citing the lack of condemnation of Hamas. But does the U.S. support the call for extended humanitarian pause in Gaza, and will you encourage Israel to abide by the UN Security Council resolution, which it has rejected?
We do support expanded humanitarian pauses in Gaza. The president's made this very clear. When Israel announced humanitarian pauses last week, the president said he wanted to see longer ones, and we do want to see longer ones, and we continue to push for longer ones. We did vote against the resolution, as you said, because it did not condemn Hamas, which we think is important step for the UN Security Council to take. But we supported a number of provisions in the resolution, and we do hope there will be longer pauses.
Just a quick follow-up on that. President Biden has been calling for the reform of the UN Security Council and called on member states to refrain from the use of veto except in rare extraordinary conditions. But since the start of the war in Gaza, the U.S. has used its veto power, I think it's 3 times. How do you explain that in terms of consistency?
We thought those were appropriate uses of the veto. We were trying to reach a compromise resolution, which ultimately the Security Council was able to do. Tracy, go ahead.
Thank you. On the truck inspections, you said the problem with the trucks getting in is the inspections.
Yeah.
Does that mean Israel is dragging its feet or slow walking?
It means we have had difficulty reaching an agreement on the appropriate inspection mechanism. I'll leave it at that.
You don't want to say what the whole...
I don't, but we've had problem getting an agreement on what the appropriate inspection mechanism is.
Okay, and on the hospital evacuations, you said the problem is Hamas. But if, as Israel claims, they've taken over Shifa, the Hamas is on the run, or they've been killed or driven out, how is Hamas physically an impediment to evacuation?
It's a different question. I was referring to, following up with Olivia on a comment I made the other day before Israel had gone in to Al-Shifa Hospital when we were supporting evacuation of patients, and Israel said at the time that they would support evacuation of patients. They were not in control of parts of the hospital yet. They had the hospital surrounded and would have to let patients come out, and said that they they would, and Hamas was objecting. Well, in our assessment, wanted to continue to use patients as a human shield. Different question now. We would continue to support. I don't have an update on conversations about whether that's an actual possibility. It may be that it's overtaken by events and that the hospital can get back up to running, but that's not. I'm not able to make that assessment at all at this time.
Sorry, the question before Tracy's about the UN resolution. You said that was in reference to the resolution, the UN Security Council resolution?
The one that passed
yesterday?
Yeah.
Okay, you said you voted against it.
Sorry, abstained, misspoke, abstained.
Yeah, you didn't vote for it. But
we abstained, sorry.
If you had voted against it,
I'm aware, I'm allowed to misspeak sometimes.
No, you are, but I just was a little bit confused because I know that,
I think
that it passed.
Yes, so, yes, I'm aware. My grave apologies. Alex, go ahead.
Gravely.
Question of substantial military presence versus operation at the hospitals. You did mention a number of times that it's Hamas operates inside the hospital, and you also said you have seen rifles. Can you elaborate a little bit more on what else you have seen that we may not have seen?
No. We've seen I will elaborate on the public evidence that we've all seen, but in terms of any kind of intelligence that we have, no, of course not.
But you have seen the presence, not operational.
We are confident enough to make the statement we made 2 days ago that Hamas operates tunnels under hospitals and that they operate a command node at Al-Shifa Hospital, but I'm not going to get into any other detail about intelligence matters other than that.
Thank you. I'm asking because both the president and secretary multiple times called on Israel not to make the same mistake that they have made, the U.S. has made after 9/11. Just want to make sure we aren't, helping them make the same mistake by just, making those statements about operational part. If we have only seen the evidence of presence, not operation.
If you're only, I lost you in
that. Only seeing the presence of Hamas.
Again, I want to reiterate what I said a minute ago, which is my understanding Israel is in the middle of this operation to take Al-Shifa and have not fully taken it yet, and I think it's a little too early to be passing definitive judgments.
I have Azerbaijan.
Okay. You want to do it now before I come?
Yes. Yeah, thank you very much. Azerbaijan rejected peace talks in Washington next week. Let me get a fresh reaction so I can follow up.
Look, I will say, as we've said before, that we continue to support peace talks to resolve the issues between Azerbaijan and Armenia. We would encourage the two parties to engage in those talks, whether they are here, whether they are somewhere else, and that'll continue to be our policy.
As a secretary,
I'll come to you next, Michelle.
Yesterday said that they have downgraded, canceled a number of high-level meetings with Azerbaijan. When you say high-level, how high do you have in mind? I'm asking because his own deputy was in Azerbaijan a couple of weeks ago.
Let me take
a country that has never received, vice president.
Let me take that one back and get back to you.
And there's one quick follow-up. So you had this decision not to have high-level meetings, but you did have exemption for Karabakh talks because you invited the foreign minister. Is that the case?
Again, let me just take that one back, Alex. Michelle,
go
ahead. No, go ahead.
They'll be quick. I'm sorry. One is, have you lifted sanctions on China's Institute for Forensic Science? And the other one is on Guatemala. The Supreme Court is allowing these cases to go ahead against the president-elect. He's calling it slow motion coup, and I'm wondering if you guys think it's a legitimate case or not.
Let me start with the China piece. So, first of all, let me talk about the meeting yesterday and what the president was able to announce, and that is the resumption of bilateral cooperation to combat illicit drug manufacturing and trafficking, including, most significantly from our standpoint, fentanyl, the establishment of a working group for ongoing communication and law enforcement coordination. We have seen China take 4 important steps in this regard. Number 1, they are issuing a notice to their domestic industry advising on the enforcement of laws and regulations related to the trade in precursor chemicals and pill presses, something that we think is very important. They did a similar notice in 2019, and it led to a drastic reduction in the seizure of fentanyl shipments to the United States. They have begun taking law enforcement actions against Chinese synthetic drugs and chemical precursors. As a result, there are PRC-based pharmaceutical companies that have already ceased operations, others that have had international payment accounts blocked. At the beginning of this month, for the first time in nearly 3 years, the PRC started resubmitting incidents to the International Narcotics Control Board's global database, which is used to share real-time information internationally about suspicious shipments and suspected trafficking, which is important to let global law enforcement, including U.S. law enforcement, take action against the shipment of precursor chemicals. And then fourth, as I said, we've relaunched this working group so our policy and technical experts can discuss law enforcement efforts and exchange information. So we think those were incredibly important steps. And then with respect to the delisting of the PRC's Ministry of Public Security's Institute for Forensic Science, that is a step that we have taken. It became clear to us in conversations with the PRC, dating back to the conversations that the Secretary launched in June when he traveled to Beijing, that the continued listing of the IFS on the Commerce Entity List was a barrier to achieving cooperation on stopping the trafficking of precursor chemicals. It was a top priority for the Secretary and for the President to stop the trafficking of precursor chemicals out of China that can be used to produce fentanyl that comes into the United States. And so when we evaluated the issue and looked at all the merits of delisting the IFS, ultimately we decided that given the steps China was willing to take to cut down on precursor trafficking, it was an appropriate step to take. Stop there in case you have any follow-ups, and I'll go to
That's okay.
I can go to the Guatemala one.
Guatemala would be great, yeah.
Yeah. So on Guatemala, we are aware of the reports that the public ministry raided the homes of Samia Party members and others while also pursuing politically motivated arrests. We are also aware of leaked documents allegedly belonging to the public ministry indicating their attempts to undermine the Guatemalan presidential election. We condemn these provocative attempts by the public ministry and others to interfere with the transfer of power to President-elect Arevalo. These actions show a blatant disregard for the will of the Guatemalan people as expressed on Election Day, and we will continue to use all available tools to promote accountability for those involved in significant corruption and those who attempt to undermine democracy or are engaged in human rights violations and abuses in Guatemala.
Matt, can
Go
I
ahead. Yeah.
on the sanction
Delisting. So the sanction of this Institute of Forensic Science was related to human rights violation. So by removing it from the entity list, it's the United States saying that there is improvement of China's human rights practice. And how do you respond to human rights groups who is saying that this raises questions about U.S. commitment to human rights and all abuse against Uyghurs and minority groups?
So I think our record on human rights in China is pretty clear. In fact, yesterday, the president himself underscored the universality of human rights and the responsibility of all nations to respect their international human rights obligations. He raised specific concerns about human rights practices in PRC with President Xi. We've taken a number of actions since the outset of this administration related to human rights practices in China, and we will continue to do so. I think our record is very clear. But when you look at the decision we had to make, we ultimately decided that the listing of the IFS on this Commerce Entity List was a barrier to taking action that would save thousands and thousands of American lives. And so we have to make tough decisions in this administration, and the decision that we made was that when you looked at the potential of saving American lives by securing this cooperation with China on fentanyl trafficking, it was an appropriate step to take. Now, it's not the end of the story. We're going to watch how China complies with the commitments that they made to us. We're going to continue to talk with them about other steps that they can take, and we will continue to hold them accountable for their human rights record.
Right, this was an action taken by the Commerce Department, right?
Correct.
So why are you talking about it?
The Commerce Department doesn't have a podium, I think.
Well, they have email, don't they?
They do, but
They have- they put out
I try to be responsive here at the podium. Go ahead. Go ahead.
Thank you very much. I have a question about the Al-Shifa Hospital. You talked about the hostile weapons, but in the images that the IDF shared yesterday, we're seeing rifles that are in number less than 10, say a couple Qurans, discs, a laptop. Did you really look at the images and say that this is a proper headquarters, or are you hoping to see more?
Again, I didn't know that there was a sort of acceptable threshold level of rifles to be held in hospitals. I mean, I'll just say, look, I'm from Texas. Even in Texas, we don't keep assault rifles in hospitals. It is true. It is true. I looked at that. That's not. I'm surprised when I hear people saying, "Oh, there were only 10 rifles in this room." It's a hospital. It's a hospital. There shouldn't be any assault rifles. Hold on. There shouldn't be any assault rifles at a hospital. The second thing I would say is Israel continues to conduct its operations to clear all of the buildings in that hospital. And number 3, we stand by the assessment that we made the other day.
One thing, I'm sure you've been in the Middle East. I worked in the Middle East, like in courtrooms, I know shops, hospitals. There's weapons everywhere. So, what the intelligence was that it's a proper terrorist organization network headquarters. So the pictures are showing like a couple Qurans, a disc, a laptop, and like 7-8 rifles. That's why we're making that assessment. Not that as a
again,
threshold.
it is an ongoing operation. I think people should wait till the operation is concluded to draw. Hold on, no, just let me finish. To draw their final conclusions. But again, I'm given all the evidence. Look, I fully expect people to stand here and challenge the things that we say as the United States government, challenge the things that I say from this podium. I am surprised that people do not, I'm surprised that people have ignored the weight of public evidence over years and years of Hamas using civilian infrastructure as human shields. You can read multiple articles. Forget the United States government. Forget what the intelligence assessments that we make. Forget what the Israeli government says. You can read articles by multiple respected news organizations around the world whose reporters, Saeed, I will send you, I've read article, there's an article I read. So Saeed, again, can we go back to the not interrupting each other rule? Because I try to behave by that. There's an article in the New York Times about at the end of a previous conflict when they went through a mosque in Gaza and found headquarters of Hamas being based in that mosque and firing on soldiers from the mosque. There are multiple well-documented reports in international news organizations going back years. So again, fully respect everyone's right to challenge us, and we will back up the claims we make with evidence. But the idea that Hamas uses civilian infrastructure as human shields is not one I think that is really contested. Go ahead. Go ahead. What's that?
You just said you back up claims with evidence. In this particular case, you're not going to.
We make again, oftentimes it's difficult with us with intelligence matters, but like as I said, it's an ongoing Israeli operation. Go ahead.
Thank you. Different subject matter. Bangladesh government announced the election day for the parliamentary election on January 7, ignoring the protest from the opposition parties and the U.S. calls for a political consensus. So, and obviously all political parties rejected it, and the crackdown is going on. So what is your position to hold a free, fair, and credible election and make the government accountable?
So we have been consistent in our message regarding the upcoming elections, and that message remains the same now that the polling day has been announced. We want what the Bangladeshi people themselves want, free and fair elections which are conducted in a peaceful manner. We do not support one political party in Bangladesh. We don't favor one political party over the other. We urge all parties to exercise restraint, avoid violence, and work together to create the conditions for free and fair elections conducted in a peaceful manner.
One more. Ambassador Peter Haas continues to receive death threats from the ruling party members. from central to grassroots level, ruling party, Awami League leaders are speaking in the same tone, wanting to slaughter the ambassador. And the ambassador himself yesterday expressed his deep concern for his security and the embassy personal security. Does the Secretary General taking this threat seriously and this violent rhetoric?
So the safety and security of our diplomats overseas is, of course, our top priority. We take any threats against them very seriously. Violence or threats of violence directed at our diplomatic personnel is unacceptable. We have repeatedly raised our concerns about the threatening rhetoric directed at Ambassador Haas with the Bangladeshi government. I would remind them that they have an obligation under the Vienna Convention on Diplomatic Relations to ensure the safety and security of U.S. diplomatic missions and personnel, and we expect them to act on those obligations. Go ahead.
Just to follow up on the Hamas using Palestinians as a human shield, there are also articles like this article that I just found on Reuters, dated 2013, that Palestinian children are also tortured and used as shield by Israel. So it goes both ways. So my question is, do you have any information about reports by doctors in Gaza of the use of white phosphorus in Gaza and in Lebanon lately?
I don't. Go ahead.
Thank you. Different topic. So the day before yesterday, John Sopko testified at Congress, and he said clearly that the Taliban in Afghanistan are getting the U.S. aids that's supposed to be for the Afghan people. And he said clearly that whoever have guns in Afghanistan control the aid in Afghanistan. And also he indicated clearly that it is the way that the Taliban got access to these aids somehow support terrorism in Afghanistan. So I know you before said that there was some intervention from the Taliban in terms of the aid that the U.S. sent for Afghan people, but what John Sopko explained at Congress is way more beyond that what you said. So before.
A few things. Number one, the U.S. government has robust oversight measures in place to monitor the implementation of U.S.-funded humanitarian assistance around the world, which we provide to help save the most vulnerable of lives. In cases where the Taliban makes demands of our partners beyond routine operational costs, our partners pause or adjust their operations accordingly. We work with trusted international partners who have extensive experience working in the challenging environments like Afghanistan, where we have no presence, and we continually assess our activities to ensure both our assistance is reaching those for which it is intended and that our partners have appropriate mitigation measures in place to help safeguard against diversion. And if we need to take steps to change how we're delivering our aid, we of course will always do so. Go ahead.
Matthew, good afternoon. Simply, what's the latest on the efforts to get the hostages freed?
It continues to be a top priority. You heard this president speak about this a little bit yesterday. The secretary has been engaged in it. Other members of the administration at the senior most levels have been engaged in it. But it is just not a topic we find productive to talk about publicly in terms of details.
You're hearing fluctuating numbers, 239, 240. Do you have a precise number? No. How confident are you right now, as we speak here, as we sit here, that they're all alive?
I'm just not able to offer any assessments about the conditions of the hostages. Our focus is on working to try to get them home.
Okay, one more, please. Catholic Relief Services has staff on the ground in Gaza helping people, and they just told us the other day that even if more humanitarian assistance comes into Gaza, it's impossible to distribute it without a cessation of violence, in their words, a cessation of violence. What is your what's the State Department? Do you agree with that assessment?
That goes to the exact point we've been making, which is that there need to be expanded humanitarian pauses to allow, among other things, to allow the delivery of humanitarian assistance to the people that need it most.
And finally, if I may, we'll go to Africa, Sudan.
I thought you said that was the last one.
I'm sorry.
It's okay. Go ahead. Go ahead. One more.
I misspeak too sometimes.
Fair.
There we go.
Fair.
Just a simple one. Here. Pope Francis tweeted the other day, quote, "May we not forget Sudan, which suffers greatly." Is the world forgetting Sudan?
I hope not. We certainly haven't forgotten about it here. You may know that we just recently launched renewed talks with respect to Sudan and continue to push for the parties there to refrain from hostilities. We've had diplomatic personnel on the ground engaged in those diplomatic efforts. It continues to be a tragedy that we, just because there's not, there's always it's a big world, a lot of things going on at one time. Just because the focus, the international focus sometimes is lost on one country or the other. The big State Department, and there are a number of people still actively focused on trying to resolve the conflict in Sudan, which remains a very, very difficult situation. Go there, and then we'll wrap up.
Okay. Changing to APEC. During this APEC Leaders Week, the IPEF partner nations had a chance to meet and conduct negotiations. They were able to make major milestones on pillars 2, 3, and 4, but did not conclude negotiations on pillar 1 for fair and resilient trade. Do you have a comment on the meetings and outcomes?
I don't. It's something that we continue to work on, and we'll have a full readout at the conclusion of APEC. With that, a wrap for today.
Can you send Saeed your articles? No,
Sure.
I would like you to send at the same time to me, at least, and anyone else who wants it, the findings of your exhaustive, I'm sure, canvassing of Texas hospitals that proves that there are no weapons, assault rifles or others, looking there. Because as far as I know, there are armed guards at most hospitals in the United States, and I presume that Texas, being a Second Amendment haven,